Well, I said there was no need to introduce me. I'm the only English chick around here, I think. And I don't have an accent, as I explained to some of you before when I was here. You all have an accent. Although since I last saw you, I have now become an American citizen. Yes. I am one of you in more ways than I was before, and so you finally accepted me into the clan, and I am married to an American, so the good news is that I am bilingual. I speak your language, I understand you, and I love this nation. I always have been coming here most of my life, and funny thing is, when God says something, you never quite know how it's going to work out. And maybe that's just to encourage some of you today that are sat on a word that you're like, I had this word years ago and it's not worked out yet and I don't really understand it. Years ago, I'm talking over 20 years ago, God spoke over my life that I'd always have a foot in two nations, America and England. And he asked me, would I be willing to have a foot in those two nations? And I had no idea what that was about. I had no idea that that's how God would lead my ministry. And I had no idea I was going to marry an American later down the line. It's just sometimes you have to just wait for the word to come true in its season. But I gladly now, even to the point of dual nationality, definitely have my foot in both nations. So I love God's word, how he always brings it to pass in his timing. Well, I get to open the word with you this morning and later on this afternoon, and two different things I want to share that are on my heart to share. And I guess I want to begin by speaking to many of you about the things that are within you that you have yet to awaken. I want to talk to all of you about the incredible potential that sits inside of you that maybe you are in denial about, or maybe you don't believe is true of your life. And I'm not talking about a certain age of person, a certain lifestyle that you have. I'm talking about every single one of God's kids is full of potential. You have unbelievable gift and talent inside of your life. And I know that to be true because you have an unbelievable Father who put it there. He destined and designed you to do awesome things for him. And often our circumstances in life tell us otherwise. The normality of our life, the average of our day, the mundane of the tasks that we do day in and day out begin to tell us that's all that we are good for and that's all that we will amount to. But your circumstances do not dictate the call that's on the inside of you. And I think a lot of times in the church we have not switched on what God has placed inside of us. And the reason why the world seems darker is because there's less lights going on than God intended for them to go on. And I'm on a mission today to get all of you to light up on the inside, to understand that you were made to shine. Turn to the girl next to you and say, shine, shine. See, the thing is, I could hold in my hand this right now, and I could stand here all morning, and I could tell you about the incredible potential this holds. I could tell you that this has the potential to change the atmosphere in a room. I could tell you that this has the potential to let you see in that thing that you call a handbag, but it's more like a black hole. I could tell you that this has the potential to change the dynamics in a room. It has the potential to give light in a space where there is no light. It has incredible potential to do many things. But the fact is, whilst ever I am holding this potential in my hand, it is just words. It is not a reality. And that's because this potential needs a partner. God has designed your potential to have a partner. And the partner's name is purpose. Matthew 5 verse 14 puts it this way: you're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. So if I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? No, I'm putting you on a light stand. And now I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand. Shine. The light within you is made for the light stand that you are called to be in your community and in your world. There is a purpose that when your potential finds it, the two things will come together. And when they come together, everything begins to change. Now what I was talking about is visible. Now what I told you it could do, you can see it is doing. Now these two elements are working in the way that God intended them. So the problem is not that we don't have potential. The problem is that we have often not placed our potential alongside its purpose. Now, there is a journey that you have to take in order for potential and purpose to partner with one another. There's a walk you must go through, and that walk is the walk for this illumination to happen. And it's not a walk you do once in life, even twice in life. It's a walk you will take over and over again, because the truth is that some of you are shining in areas of your life. Your potential and purpose are together in areas of your life. But I would suggest to you that maybe you are not at the full wattage yet of what God intended for your life. And so we have to keep going on this journey. Moses had to revisit this journey when God said, get out of the desert. There's something else for you to do. Esther, when she was being pampered in the palace, had to go on a journey to understand, no, I am born for such a time as this. There was potential inside all of them, but the purpose would awaken it. And so I want to examine, for the time I have this morning in this session, the walk that one such person took to awaken what was already within him. He was not known for greatness, and no one seemed to call greatness out of him. In fact, if we were honest, his family, his own family, considered him a little useless and actually annoying. He would sit around the house, and he would be around the home, and he would be strumming on his guitar and singing his latest tunes, and his family just get fed up of hearing his latest, greatest hits. And they did not really know what to do with him, and so they sent him out of the home, out of the family business, and they said, you know what you're good for? You're good for watching sheep. His name was David. They sent this young boy up a hill, and they said, you know, at the top of that hill, there is a willing audience for your latest, greatest tunes. They will bar along with all of them. And so David diligently went up the hill and was assigned this responsibility of watching sheep. It didn't sound very grand, and it wasn't very grand. It was out of sight, out of mind, while his family carried on doing what they considered the important work. But let me tell you, just because at seasons in your life you are out of sight and even out of mind, it does not mean that potential is not already within you. Just because he was sat on a hill with a load of sheep did not mean greatness was not within him. It was always there. Just because you're folding laundry or nursing a sick child does not mean that greatness is not within you. It is always there. Just because you work a checkout register in a grocery store and nobody even remembers your name when you come to do your shift does not mean that greatness is not already there. Our environment does not dictate what was in us. God dictates what is in us. So David on the hill, he was already full of greatness. He was already marked as a man that God was going to use. He was already someone that had gift within him beyond his years. He was a kid in everyone's eyes, but God knew he would be a king. And so as he sat on the hill, with all of this inside of him, there came a moment where potential was going to need to find purpose in order for him to shine. And that happened by one day him going for a walk. The walk began with a request, and the request seemed very, very ordinary. In fact, it almost seemed insulting if you were to think you were made for more than this errand. But the errand that David was given that day was, David, we need you to take sandwiches to your brothers. You know, the important people in this family, the ones that are doing the real work, we need you to just go drop off some cheese and some bread with those down there that are doing the hard work in this family. David, have you got that? I love David for many, many reasons. But here's one of the things I first love about this. I love that David was not arrogant. And David was not full of himself. Because an arrogant David would have said, excuse me, I do not do bread and cheese. I am a great songwriter. In fact, here is my latest CD that I cut on the hill with the sheep. Get a load of me. If you understood how great I was, you would not ask me to do such menial tasks. Be very careful how you approach the very ordinary things God may ask you to do. Because God will often use bread and cheese to bump you into your destiny. But a lot of people say no to bread and cheese and then get mad that their moment has not come. And God's like, I tried to give you it 6 months ago. It was in the car park. I tried to give you it 3 months ago. It was meeting someone in the baby room. I tried to give it to you a few weeks ago when I asked you to go and run that errand for me and be faithful in that little. But you seemed to think that there was something greater coming, and so you sat it out. Don't sit out what you have said. It can't be that. God won't use that. He will never use that. God will use the bread and cheese of your life to take you on a walk, to awaken what is within you. David said, yes, I'll go run an errand. So he runs the errand and his walk begins, a walk that he is not even aware he's going to go on, a walk that's going to change his life forever. But on that walk, he is going to have to deal with some saboteurs. He's going to have to deal with some people that want to shut down what God is trying to wake up. He's going to have to learn how to handle some voices that are not coming to cheer him on, but they're coming to put him off. And I want to suggest to you, in the 20 minutes I have left, there are 3 voices that you must navigate on the walk between your potential and your purpose. There are saboteurs that you must silence if you want to awaken what is on the inside of you. And as I identify all 3, you will probably be able to think to yourself, I am right there at this moment in time. And I pray today you'll get wisdom of how to keep walking and stop talking to the wrong people at the wrong time. This story unfolds in 1 Samuel 17. After saying yes to the simple errand, he sets off down the hill. He heads out that day unaware of what's before him, only mindful of what has been entrusted to him. He sets off and he comes down the hill, and as he comes down the hill with the bread and cheese, we find that he bumps into the first voice. The first voice that will try and stop you from shining, the first voice that will try and stop you from awakening what is within you, is what I call the voice of limitation. The voice of limitation. Now, this voice comes often from those that know us the most. This voice for David was going to come through his brother. His brother saw David approaching with bread and cheese, but his brother, instead of being welcoming and instead of being thankful that he was bringing bread and cheese, began to resent the fact that David had showed up in his space. And as David innocently comes down to the front line, his brother sees him conversing with another one of the soldiers, and it says in 1 Samuel 17, verse 28, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom, listen to this line, did you leave those few sheep? It doesn't even say sheep. He's letting David know, you're only good for a few sheep. You don't belong where we belong. You need to go back up the hill, out of sight, out of mind. Why are you in my space? See, the enemy doesn't want you to come down from the hill. He certainly doesn't want you to get closer to your purpose. So as soon as you start taking the walk, he'll start to speak up through different people and different places. And the voice of limitation will often be the first voice you will bump into. Who do you think you are? See, David's brothers, they knew him. They grew up with him. And one of the hardest places to awaken your potential is in the place where you grow up and did life. I've been in the same church all my life, and now with my husband, we senior pastor that church. That's the hardest thing to do, to become a pastor to people that saw you when you were an annoying teenager. Hello? My church saw me when I was a brat. My church saw me when I stuffed up. My church saw me when I was not doing what I now stand up and preach and tell them to do. They have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's hard to stay in a place where many have a limitation perspective of you and shine. But God was saying, David, you're going to have to do it here. So you're going to have to learn to deal with limitation. So he comes down the hill, and his brother then goes on, after reminding him of who he's not and telling him who he is. He then says, I know how conceited you are, David. Now these are false accusations. And how wicked your heart is that you've come down here only to watch the battle. Not true, not true, not true. And when you are being accused and when you are being limited by those around you, family members, colleagues, people that know you, it's really, really tempting to defend yourself. Because what's just been said is not true. He's not down there because he's conceited, and he's not down there to watch the battle. He's down there running an errand that was given to him by his father. So the reason why he's there is innocent, but they are making it something else. And it's very tempting in the moments where the voice of limitation speaks up to try and prove yourself. But I love David. Because David, it says, simply says, now what have I done? Can I even speak? And then it says this. So David turned around and began to speak to someone else. David knew there is no point arguing with the voice of limitation, because it does not want to be convinced of what you are trying to convince it of. There is no point sitting in meetings discussing something with someone who has already limited you in where you can go and what you can do. There's no point wasting your breath in a fight that there is no outcome that is good in. You should save your voice for the fight that's coming later that good will come out of. But much of the church never shine because they are trapped in rooms talking to limitation. See, you have to understand, God knows this is going to happen. And others know this possibly could happen. And though some will be happy that you are moving finally and you are getting out what is in you when you shine, there are those that will be glad, but there are those that will bring shade. Some people permanently carry around a shade in their bag. Preach a message and they're like, oh, let me just shade that for a moment. Say something, let me just bring a little shade to that for a moment. You shine in an area, let me just tweet a little shade over that. Let me just Facebook some shade over you right now. Because I liked it when you were out of sight and out of mind. I don't like it that you've come off your hill. Limitation. If you live your life around the voice of limitation, you will only ever have your potential in front of a few sheep. But if you are willing to silence the saboteur called limitation by not arguing, but by simply turning around and moving in the direction God told you to move, by not getting into the ugly of the fight, but turning around and moving in the direction God told you to move, and putting more trust in the God that sent you than the one who's trying to stop you. The voice of limitation. It can be from friends. It can be from family. It can be from siblings. It can be from parents. It can be from church members. It can be from those that you've done life with all along. They're just uncomfortable that somehow you are breaking the containment that they liked you in. But if you're going to shine, you're going to have to take the walk. If you get past the voice of limitation, just like David did, you will soon bump into the second voice, the second saboteur. And the second saboteur, the second voice, I call the voice of manipulation. The voice of manipulation, it is subtle and it almost seems like it wants to help you. And for David, this voice came through a man named Saul. At this point in time, we don't know as much as Saul as we are about to find out down the line, but Saul's already showing his insecurity in this conversation. Saul, as we know later on, was a control freak. Saul needed to be in charge of everything. And so when he saw a young man aspiring to take on an enemy, he suddenly realized, I think this will look good for me if I am in control of it. See, some people don't mind you shining as long as they control the lighting board. As long as they can make sure that you don't outshine them. That if your shine gets a little brighter, they can have the dim switch to bring it a little back down. They don't mind you shining while it makes them look good, but don't you dare think of shining where it looks like you're good on your own. You're welcome. Manipulation begins to tell you, okay, well, if you're going to shine, let me help you. This is how you shine. This is how we're going to do it because that's how we've always done it. It's going to be my way and I'll work with you, but I'll work with you in my armor. And so Saul says to David, young man, you are taking a walk. I see you are heading in a direction. I see what's ahead of you, so let me help you. Not everyone who says, let me help you, is actually helping you. Some people that say, let me help you, are helping themselves through you. And you need to know the difference. Saul says, hey, come here. You want to fight this guy? I have just the outfit for you. Now, it did not take a genius to figure out that this was already a bad idea. Because the Bible tells us that Saul was tall and impressive. His physique was strong and broad. And it also tells us that David was described as a ruddy teenage boy. Scrawny, smaller, not statured like the way that his physique was, like Saul's was. And so their two types of body shape were completely different. But what is it about the church where we're like, well, God only can do it one way? No, God can do it however many ways God decides to do it. And a lot of churches are stuck because they love Saul's armor too much. And they're not willing to trust God to do something different. God's the same, but we have to change. Hello? It's God that changeth not the church. So Saul says, put this armor on, and I'm sure around the room everyone was like, this is a bad idea. This is going to look ridiculous. But here's what I love about David again. David said, okay, I'll give it a go. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't prideful. He wasn't argumentative. He wasn't difficult. He said, you know what? If that's what you're asking of me, I'll give it a go. I'm going to put this armor on and I'm going to try it on. I'm going to see whether I can make it work. I'm going to try and lift this sword that is really heavy. I'm going to see whether I can do what it is I think I'm supposed to do wearing this. He had a willingness and humility to try it on. Don't be a brat and don't be obnoxious, because that will turn your light off just as fast. And so he puts it on and he begins to drag himself. And he says, I'm not sure this is the best outfit for what is ahead. I can't lift this thought. I feel like I am drowning in the weight of what fits you well. And so many people don't shine because they have armor on that other people have made them wear. Expectations that God never put on them, but someone somewhere did. Things they're trying to lift that were not ever God's intention for them to lift. Clothing they're trying to wear to keep everybody happy, but actually nobody's happy. Be careful that you don't allow the voice of manipulation to stop you shining in the way God intended you to shine. And be careful you don't become the voice of manipulation in someone else's life. I have no idea what my kids will go on and do, but I know one thing for sure. I'd rather God does his job with them than me. My job is to guide, to love, to encourage, to believe, to cheer, to challenge, to help mold. But it's God's job. What armor fits them and what doesn't. It's God's job to awaken what is within them. Let's just be kind enough to one another to celebrate the different ways God has called us to shine. If you get past the voice of limitation, and if you get past the voice of manipulation, you'll be left with one more voice. This voice is the loudest of them all because now the enemy is beginning to panic because he didn't think you'd make it past number one, and he certainly didn't think you'd have the guts to shake off number two. And so now he's annoyed because you're getting closer to the place where these two elements come together. Your shining is more a reality now than it ever was before. And so he ramps it up when it comes to the third voice. And the third voice is the voice of intimidation. It's louder than the first two. It's scarier than the first two. The voice of intimidation for David came from Goliath. And the voice boomed down over him. And it began to tell him all the things he was not. The voice of intimidation can be a past failure that wants to come and revisit you in your future. The voice of intimidation can be a fear. What if it doesn't work out? What if I embarrass myself? What if this isn't God? The voice of intimidation will make you feel small. It will reduce you down. It will make you question what should not be questioned. So many don't shine because this one takes them out. This one wipes them out. But when the voice of intimidation speaks, you simply must do what David did. He stood in front of the voice of intimidation. And he heard it shout. And then he answered it from his place of validation. Goliath, I know you're big, but my God is greater. Goliath, I know you're looking down on me, but my God is over you. Goliath, I know you are strong on the outside, but I have strength you know not of on the inside. And Goliath, though you judge me by my small appearance, you have no idea of the greatness God is birthing inside of me. Goliath, you may want to intimidate me, but I have learned who validates me. And the God that was with me on the hill, and the God that was with me in the lion and the bear scenario is the God that is with me now. You have to know who validates you. And because he knew who validated him, he also knew, I don't need the armor because the God that validates me works really well with a stone. and a sling. See, David had found a place on that walk of being secure in who he was because of whose he was. Don't despise your sling and stone. Stand in the strength that God says, I'll use that just as much as I used that in the last generation, just as much as I did that for them, I'll do it for you. But you've got to know when intimidation speaks, how to shut it up. So as Goliath shouted, David answered, and as he answered, he let go of what was in his hand. And as he let go of what was in his hand, he took down the voice of intimidation, and all of a sudden what had always been there all along was suddenly seen by everyone. Now everyone was a witness to the shine that was within him. Now all the other voices had to be silent at the moment that God had awakened something through him. Now all of the critics had nothing else to say because it was clear that God was with him. You need to understand you will have to battle all of those voices many times over. The voice of limitation, the voice of manipulation, and the voice of intimidation. And the enemy will work really hard to stop this from ever happening. But when you let it happen, everything changes. Because all of a sudden you can't go back to hiding on a hill. All of a sudden you can't just disappear with a few sheep. All of a sudden what is on the inside of you has become alive and is now shining through you. And though there will be ones who want to bring you shade, God also has something else up his sleeve. Because at the other side of this moment are relationships that God has lined up for your future. I wish they were this side. I wish that they would show up here when I'm facing Goliath, but I have found they don't show up here because God needs you to face Goliath. But they show up at the other side. And for David, at the other side of this moment was Jonathan. What Saul was insecure about, Jonathan had no fear about. Where Saul was controlling, Jonathan was liberating. Where Saul tried to say, do it my way, Jonathan said, let me give you my tunic and cloak. Do it however God says to do it. Jonathans are in your future. Jonathans will help you to the next level. Jonathans will speak words over you and give wisdom for the path ahead of you. But they can't show up until you take a walk. Stop praying, send Jonathan up to my hill. And start praying, God, give me confidence to walk my walk and awaken what's within. I don't know where this finds you, but I do know we all take this walk. I do know we all hear these voices. And so I'm simply here to let you know today, you were made to shine. You were made to shine. All across the room, just stand to your feet. Where are you on the walk? What voice are you having a conversation with? Where have you settled in something that you shouldn't have settled in? Where are you frightened to take the next step? Where is intimidation shouting over you? Just all across the room, close your eyes. And if you know right now one of those voices you're having to deal with, one of those places you're getting stuck in, just lift your hands all across the room. And I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to use my words to put strength into your spirit, into your soul today, to remind you what God says about you, to remind you to take the next step, to remind you to stop hiding when God said it's time to shine. Father, you see all of these hands in this room today. And God, you have placed so much potential in every single life. God, potential the enemy would love to snuff out, to shut down. But God, we stand in your presence today and we remind ourselves, I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I am not less than. I am serving the God who is more than. And And I pray today courage would arise in every single heart to take the next step, to shut down the conversations that are limiting, to take off the armor that is manipulating, to speak to the voice that is intimidating. God, I pray today we would shake off what you never asked us to put on. And we would have a confidence today in the sling and the stone of which you have gifted us in our individual lives. And God, I pray today that we would not be frightened of the shade, but we would step out and shine. And I pray for those who wonder what's at the other side of those moments. God, I pray Jonathan's in their future, relationships in their future, that take them to the next level, that are not there to control, but they are there to help them be all you've called them to be. God, I thank you. I thank you for the walk. I thank you we need it. I thank you it teaches us. I thank you it builds us. I thank you it instructs us. God, I don't despise the walk today. I embrace it. And I thank you that you see enough in me to know I can make it. So God, encourage every heart, strengthen every woman, silence every saboteur. In Jesus' name, amen.